Back to the show, Small Business Shop and Entrepreneurship. We're back, and I'm thrilled to be joined by Eric Dunavant, who is an author, speaker, consultant, and serial entrepreneur. He's been in the financial service industry for over 2 decades, working with top wealth advisors, and has received many, many, many accolades about business and finance. So, Eric, welcome to the program. Thanks for joining us on Get Down to Business.
Shalom, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Absolutely. No, it's a pleasure. I've read a lot about you and your background. So serial entrepreneur, I love to hear your background and how you became so passionate about shaking things up and making a difference in business.
Well, I call myself the mindset disruption strategist, and it really comes down to this idea that I have this knack for looking at business and just saying, hey, my favorite motto is, if it's not broke, break it. And so from a business standpoint, I've just found myself constantly looking at different businesses and saying, hey, what if we looked at a different way to do this? What if we looked at a different way to serve the public and turn it into a success? And it just keeps turning into other businesses over time. That's kind of the serial entrepreneur part of that.
I love it. Absolutely. Keep breaking things, which is great. So I want to sort of dive deep so we can share lessons learned and some of your subject matter expertise with our listeners. So what does being a serial entrepreneur mean as it relates to success and failure? What has worked really well for you, and what pitfalls would you want our listeners to avoid?
Well, I guess the one thing I would say regarding being a serial entrepreneur is the number one thing that I think when it comes to success or failure is most people are so afraid of failing they don't even start. So like the very first business that my wife and I opened together was a children's clothing line that was specifically focused on collegiate clothing, but we opened it in like 2000, 2001. If we were 10 or 15 years later, that would have been an incredibly successful business, but we failed at it. And along the way, just learning about customer service, learning about things that could go wrong inside of that. And if we had never started, like all the lessons wouldn't have come to us. And I think that's really the biggest downfall that most people have, is they're too scared to get off the sidelines, and it's okay to fail.
That's great advice. And again, I'm chatting with the serial disruptor over here, and I mean that in the most positive way possible. The mindset disruption strategist, Eric. You've got a lot going on. You share all of it with our listeners and with the world at large. Tell us a little bit about your book and some of your other mechanisms that you're sharing information.
Yeah, so I've actually got 2 books. So I wrote a book a number of years ago called "What If We've Been Doing It All Wrong?" Again, kind of back to this idea of mindset disruption. It's a financial book really focused on what if the mindsets and the way that we approach finance need to be readjusted and rethought out. And it really comes down to this idea that when we think about money, most of the time we think about how much we can make, not the impact that the money can flow through us to make. And so that's what that book's about. But my wife and I just released a second book for kids, or maybe for parents, to share with their kids, called "I Crashed in Backwardsville," which is just an opportunity to teach the same philosophies and ideas to your kids, to really just show them the impact that the resources that we've all been given can be used to make on the rest of the world. And so, those 2 books together, to me, are really kind of the key point of helping people disrupt mindsets, because I found, and especially with the kids book, the younger you start, the more opportunity you have to really make a difference on the next generation.
I love that you're sharing again with both adults, kids. Congrats to you and your wife on that new release, which is great. So if there's one thing that you want our listeners to remember from this conversation, from a serial entrepreneur, from the mindset disruption strategist, what would it be?
Yeah, I think my biggest piece of advice is to stop, slow down, and the word that I use is redefine success, meaning don't let the rest of the world tell you what success means. Take a step back and figure out what you want it to mean for yourself, and then set small goals along the way to get to where you want to go. Because if you don't take control of that mindset for yourself, the rest of the world has what I like to call this unconscious manipulation plan to help you end up somewhere else.
That's great. Chris, or Eric, rather, we're running close to the end of our time together, and I want to make sure our listeners can get in touch with you, pick up a copy of the book, subscribe to your podcast, and get in touch with all of the wonderful streams of information that you're sharing, as well as, of course, schedule time to talk with you. Eric, what's the best way for us to get a hold of you and your team?
Yeah, the best way to do that is to go to ericl360.com, ericl360. And the reason that's a beautiful place, you got access to my podcast and my YouTube channel, social media. You can schedule an appointment to visit with me. All of that is available right there, ericl360. And from there, just decide what is the best point of contact to stay in touch with the things that I'm doing.
Absolutely. And I know you call it your 360 network because you've got a lot of platforms that you're using. And my guess is 2 books, there's probably going to be a third one. And that's probably the best way for our listeners to subscribe and get in touch with you so they can follow all of that. Eric, really appreciate you sharing your website, all of the advice, ericl360.com. That's where you can get in touch with our amazing guest. And Eric, I look forward to having you back on real soon. But coming up after the break, we've got more small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship. You could always subscribe, rate, review, and share on Get Down to Business. Just go to your favorite podcast app and search for Get Down to Business, or visit my website, shalomklein.com. But we'll be right back, so don't touch that dial. You're listening to the show all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship.